And that's what appraisers use. Do you think we have appraisers that appraise stocks? Do they call appraisers? Why don't we have appraisers that appraise stocks?
Because it's speculative?
No?
It's not speculative. Then it can.
Also no?
Because
Remember, what is
it's on
appraisal?
market valuation versus an individual's.
What does appraiser do? What appraisers do in real estate? They tell you the market value of a particular property. I know what is the market value.
The economy?
The market value of Amazon is $789.74. You know how I know? Because somebody a few hours ago paid that price. So that is the market price. Okay, we do not need appraisers to tell us what is the market value of Amazon. What we do have in the stock market, the bond market, are investors that would say, well, you know, 798.74 is not good enough for me. I think it's worth, so the investment value, I think it's worth 750, so I'm not going to buy it because it's only worth 750 and the market price is 789, so I'm not going to invest right now. Or I think it's worth 850, so I will invest right now because I can get something that's worth 850 for 789. Those investors are looking for investment value. Do not look for market value. So again, separating. Market value is what appraisers do. They basically take a cap rate that is typical for your property in that area, applying it to your NOI, and this is the market value. This is what somebody would pay for your property if it stays for reasonably long enough on the market. That is what it will receive in the market. It does not mean that it's a good investment or a bad investment. It does not tell you what rate of return you will earn. So in order to achieve those goals that are important, let's look at something else. So the something else is basically a DCF, which is a discount cash flow model, which is surprisingly under right here, IPP example, which I believe we actually opened last time. Okay, so last time we looked at the pro forma, and we said, okay, this particular property has an NOI either 294 or 256, depends on how you look at that. And we talked about why 256 is probably the one you want to really view as a buyer because it considered those capital expenditures that are actual expenses. So this is the NOI we're looking at. Going a step farther, we're going to go to the next tab, which is the unlevered valuation. Okay, so let's open this up. Sure nobody needs me? Okay, we're good. All right, inputs. We have this property where the asking price or acquisition price, if I were to buy it, is $3.8 million. And that is coming from here. That is what either this is the price, let's say, that we believe that we can get this property for, because they want maybe 3.9, and we think that it's reasonable after negotiation, we're going to get it for 3.8. At least this is the price that we are entertaining buying at. Okay? We have the NOI at the first year, what is expected. We're already talking from the previous tab. It's $256,000. The going-in cap, it's basically one divided by the other. Okay, we also had it in the previous tab. Required rate of return. So remember, required rate of return, it is the minimum rate of return that you're willing to accept in order to invest in this property. In other words, it's some rate of return that if somebody tell you, hey, you should invest in this property and you're going to get something less than that, you should say, no thank you, I'd rather invest in something else. Okay? Now, how do we determine this rate of return? I will just give you a very brief overview of the curve, and I think we discussed it before. But basically, we have something that looks like this. This is expected return. This is risk. And how we measure risk, we'll talk in a different class, but generally speaking, risk. We have some investments where you can assume no risk and still get some return. Those are basically the risk-free investment. So buying a treasury for a short period of time will give you some return. It's going to be low, and you're going to have no risk because you're guaranteed to get your money back. And then from that point on, you basically have a curve like that is concave. And when I'm saying concave, it means that it's increasing in a decreasing rate. Okay, something that is increasing at an increasing rate is like that. But see, this is something that is increasing but at a decreasing rate. So the slope here is higher than the slope later on. Right? This is steeper than that. So it's increasing at a decreasing rate. So every time you assume more risk, you're getting lower and lower benefit, but you still get the benefit. So this is your risk-free right here. And if we are comparing different asset classes, you basically have here MBSs, mortgage-backed securities. Then you have corp bonds. Then you have real estate. And then you have stocks. This is basically the general order of different investments and the risk relationship between them. So you can get some return on risk-free. If you want to take a little bit more risk of mortgage-backed securities, those are basically debt instruments where you learn a lot in your real estate finance course. You're lending your money, but with some collateral. Basically, they're backed by real estate. So if you don't receive the money, you have something to account on, something to take. After that, you have corporate bonds. Those corporate bonds usually are not collateralized. So if the firm is going bust, you have nothing after to go. You can't go after anything really. You can go after the firm, but in most cases the firm has nothing left because they tried everything. That's why they failed, right? If they had things that still worth money, they would pay you that to begin with. So that's the corporate bonds. Then you have real estate, and then you have stocks. Now, of course, within this hierarchy, we know that not all real estate create the same. Not all stocks create the same. Not all corporate bonds create the same, and so on and so forth. So really you have some kind of a range for each one of them, and that means that some of the range, of course, can overlap. So it can be some of the riskier real estate actually would return more than some of the less risky stocks. And some of the less risky stocks some of the less risky real estate may return less than some of the riskier bonds. So they overlap a little bit, and that's fine, but this is basically the relationship. Now what happens, of course, when interest rates are going down or up? The whole curve is shifting up and down. So if the risk-free rate is going from here to here, like right now when interest rate is just very low, basically means that you have a curve that looks like that. So on real estate, rather than expecting 11% or whatever it is, now you're expecting 9% or some other number. Okay, so I'm not telling you what the numbers are, but I'm basically telling you what is the relationship. And when you're talking about required of return, you need to think about what other investments with similar risk are able to return to you. And that should be your required of return. Okay? So, I'll provide more details later. So that is 9% in this case. Expected NOI growth, 3%. That is your assumption based on economic fundamentals, supply of buildings in the market, immigration, jobs, whatever it is you find. You have a reason to believe that 3% is appropriate. By the way, there is a difference between you have a reason to believe and I feel that. And by the way, I want to say that when I read the report, some of the groups that submit reports, they said things like, we feel that 3% or whatever is appropriate. Feelings is a wonderful thing, but they have more room in arts than in a real estate report. Okay, so saying something like, we have reason to believe, and here's the 1 or 2 or 3 reasons, it's very different than we feel that 3% is appropriate. People will not take you very seriously if you say that we feel that this is appropriate. Okay? So, we have reason to believe that 3% appropriate. This is hypothetical property, so I'm not really going to back it. Terminal growth rate. Terminal growth rate is how quickly you're going to grow your NOI after you sell your property. So terminal basically means forever. So again, we're distinguishing between two periods. The first period is where you hold the property. And in this case, we assume here that we hold the property for 8 years. Okay, this is our holding horizon, or at least what we want to consider for investment. After that, we can decide whether we're going to sell it or not, but let's consider 8 years. So this 3% is representative of the next 8 years, basically your holding period. It's kind of the medium term. But then the property will continue to probably generate higher and higher NOI over time, and that will be the long term, the terminal, what happened after you sell your property. Why do you think we should care about how fast the NOI is growing after we sell it?
Value to sell it.
I'm sorry?
The value to sell it.
Okay, so of course, we may not care what will be the NOI later because we're not going to receive it, but the person that buys it from us cares, and we have to make ourselves, or basically put ourselves in their shoes, and decide what is appropriate for them to pay for a property based on some reasonable rate of growth, and that's why we care about this terminal growth rate. I'll show you how it comes in the equation. The next parameter there is the next investor risk premium. And the next investor risk premium, it's basically how much extra, all other things equal, how much extra the next investor would pay, or sorry, how much extra the next investor would want to have in terms of rate of return compared to what we want. Okay, so we want 9%, and in this case we say that the next investor would want 9.5%, 0.5% more. You have to think about, why would the next investor want more return than you? Why wouldn't you just be happy? I was happy with 9. Shouldn't they be happy with 9? I'm sorry?
Investing more?
Well, just because you invest more money doesn't mean that you get higher rate of return, right? If I invest $1 million or $10,000 in the stock market, I should not be expecting higher rate of return.
Interest rates are going up, could go up. Or
They could, but this is a separate argument. Let's assume that all other things equal. That is a separate and correct factor, but we'll touch it later.
That's what my investment goal.
Well, yours is 9. Why does the next investor deserve more?
That's what I want.
The price?
Well, no, it's not what you want. It's what you say that somebody else would want.
So we need it because we have different investment.
Why can't you find somebody like you? Right? I mean, if you are good enough to buy this property, there should be somebody else with the same profile to buy the same property 8 years later. The problem is, when you sell this property, it's going to be older and less attractive. It's as simple as that, okay? If you bought an 8-year-old property and you sold it when it's 16, it is simply older, less attractive. And if it's older, less attractive, it means that maybe there's other newer building came to the market in those 8 years that are more attractive and therefore attract more of the renters, and your property now become riskier and of a relatively lower quality. Okay? Assuming that you still kept it, but you know how it is. You kept the property, but it still deteriorates a little bit over time. It becomes riskier. And because it becomes riskier, it is appropriate for the next investor to want slightly higher return. Now let's think about, why would they want half or 3/4 or 1 or 1/4 or 0? Okay, there's some cases, and so how did you pick 0.5%? Well, here's the deal. In some cases, those 8 years of holding period make a big difference, and in some other cases, those 8 years of holding period make almost no difference. So take, for example, if I am buying a brand new college apartment building that is brand new, college apartment building next to Iowa State University. Okay? A lot of students like this place because it's brand new, it has nice amenities, and they'll go and pay basically top dollars for that city, whatever top dollar in that city is. Okay? 8 years later, this complex looks very different, because when students live there for 8 years, I'm not saying it's going to look terrible, but it's just not going to look like a brand new, just freshly designed. It's not going to be the hot new place where all the cool kids are. Okay? There's another place where it's going to be where all the cool kids are. So it loses quite a lot of value in terms of how attractive it is to people to stay there. So first of all, and also, I love those buildings that are, like apartment buildings that are built in the The Midwest, a lot of them are made out of wood. A lot of them are basically made to last for probably 30, 40, 50 years. They're not made to last 100 years, 200 years. They don't. They're designing basically for a 50-year kind of shelf life. I'm not saying they can't last for longer. Some of them do, but they basically need major innovation. They basically last for 50 years. That's kind of the design. So the difference there between age 0 and age 8 is going to be very significant. So the next investor required premium should be high. And what is high, usually when we talk about those, toward 1% is probably appropriate. So 1% is usually the higher end of those next investor risk premium. On the other hand, if I'm yeah.
What about in a commercial property that you have tenants for a long time, you show, with time you show a more stable building? Isn't that something that investors...
It depends. If your building becomes less attractive for future tenants because, there's also some locations that, they're the hot place today, and 8 years from now, the attraction in the city moves somewhere else. It's possible. But it also depends what your client looks for. If your client, for example, is a high-end financial firm or high-end law firm that always want to be in the nicest building so they can show the clients how successful they are and bring them to nice meetings and give them, then probably when the lease expires with you in 10 years, they're probably going to go somewhere else because they want to be in the nicest building. And yours is not the nicest building anymore.
But for an investor, it's better to show a tenant that's been there 10 years than 2 years, right?
Of course, yes, but not if that investor has the lease expire next year.
Of course, self-maintaining things.
Yeah, so of course, but that we talk about separate thing. If you're talking about the lease has a long time to expiration, that is separate from that.
No, that's why.
Yeah, so in this case, we just talk about apartments that on average the leases are 1 year.
Okay.
But you're right, of course, if you have tenants that are good tenants and have long leases that's still intact for many, many years, of course it's positive. Okay? But in general, if you just look at the building itself, the building interior, so the extreme example is a average quality construction, okay, that is 0 years old and then becomes 8, it's a big difference. On the other extreme, you have a building that is already 120 years old, located in the heart of Boston, some of those buildings that are brownstone that can last for basically ever, or near ever. And this building is 120 years old when you bought it, and you're going to sell it when it's 128 years old. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't become less attractive. People that wanted to live there basically want it because of the location. This 8 years difference do not make any significance. If you maintain it, it will basically be the same. So that's where the premium will be near 0. So you need to decide what kind of building you're talking about. Should be somewhere between, again, with experience you learn what it is for your market, but somewhere between 0 and 1% is appropriate for those reasons I just mentioned.
I'm sorry, on a triple net lease, for example, like on a 20-year CVS or Walgreens, you wouldn't account for that at all, right? You just...
You should be accounting for what is the
No, just lower.
extra. And in those leases, again, and in those leases, you care more about how many years left on the lease rather than the quality of the building. But as lease come to expiration, so if you have a building that expired in 8 years, you definitely want to take it into account. So you have a 30-year lease with Walgreens, but already been there for 22 years, and you planning to sell it when it comes due, you should care a lot about how good your building is and how attractive it is, because that is really all that's going to matter to you of how much you're going to rent it when the lease expires. Either negotiate with CVS or get a new tenant that will pay you good rent.
Or they can do condo conversion.
Or you can do a condo conversion if you're in South Florida. Okay? So that is the next investor risk premium. And then basically from that, we're getting those two values. So this value is pretty simple. It's basically the next buyer required return, bless you, which we're taking, okay, so I wanted 9%, the next buyer wants an extra 0.5%, together the 9.5%, okay? And the terminal cap rate. Remember, we have a going-in cap rate, which is what we pay when we enter the deal. It's first year NOI divided by the price. So the going-in cap rate is 675, and the next buyer cap rate, which is our terminal cap rate, what we sell or what the next buyer is buying, is 7%. How do I get to 7%? Well, they want 9.5%. And they're going to get 2.5% from that from the terminal growth. So the terminal cap rate, or the cap rate, will be 7%. It's basically going to this equation. Okay, if we have here, we want 9.5, and we know that this is 2.5. What is this? 7. Okay, so basically, you enter the property with a 675, and you exit the property with 7 in this particular scenario. Questions so far? All right, so let's look at, yes.
How do you compute the required rate of return?
I'm sorry?
Maybe you explained about the required rate of return?
How did I get this?
Yeah.
Again, the assumption here is that I want a rate of return that is appropriate for that level of risk. So I would refer to a graph like this. I need to realize what is the current risk rate, how much people can get on MBSs, how much people can get on average quality corporate bonds. Above that will be real estate. Whatever this number is, that should be my required of return on the average quality real estate. And if my real estate that I consider buying is less than average quality, then I would want higher return. And if my real estate is better than average quality, then I want lower rate of return. So you will basically determine that based on what are the rates in the market.
Use an IRR or? Okay.
We'll get that. Okay? So this column is basically the different years. So we have year 0, which is when you purchase the property, all the way to year 8. NOI is the amount of NOI that you expect to receive each year. So in the first year is 256,415, which is coming directly from here. That is also coming directly from the previous spreadsheet. And then every year after that, we expect to increase our NOI according to expectation by 3%. So this is 3% higher than this, and this is 3% higher than this, and this is 3% higher than this, and so on and so forth. Okay, so each one of those numbers is basically growing by 3% a year. Now you have here a column for acquisition and disposition, basically the price that you pay and the price that you expect to sell the property. So acquisition price, it's pretty simple. You know there is no projections there because once you sign the dotted line, you know the prices. There's no surprise. It's done. Done deal. $3.8 million, it's a times 0. What is more difficult to determine, but we need to estimate, is for how much you can sell your property for. But we already made all the assumptions that allow us to get a value. And again, I know this is primitive, easy. We need to start somewhere. We're going to build into something. Francisca is going to see tomorrow. We're going to get to something a little bit more complex as we go. But you have to wait until the next course. I know you can't wait, but you have to wait until next course. But for the very basic model and very basic assumptions, this is the estimated price. And how do we get to that? The estimated price is basically NOI year 8, that's what I'm making during the 8th year that I'm holding the building. I multiplied by 1 plus C8, and C8 is the terminal NOI growth. It's how much it's going to begin growing after I'm done with the property. So it's going to start growing at 2.5% a year after that. So I'm increasing it because remember, to get the value of the property, you want NOI 1. You always want the NOI the next year. So when you buy it, it's NOI 1 divided by price. But when you sell it, in this case, it's NOI 9, because you're at year 8, divided by the price. Okay? So this together is NOI 9, taking 8 and taking 1 period forward. And then you divide it by the cap rate, which we already decided that it's 7% by the time you sell the property. So your estimated price to sell the property, according to the market conditions that you just described, is $4.6 million. Okay? Questions?
How often do you see that inverse, where you buy at a 7 and you sell like at a 5 to the next person? So I've seen it here.
Well, if you buy for 7 and sell for 5, or the other way around.
Right, you buy at 7, you sell it at 5.
Well, that happened all the time in the last 30 years. Because interest rates kept going down, So people thought, oh my God, I'm so smart, I make so much money in real estate. Don't realize, like, no, it's not, because you may be smart, but that's not why you make money. You make money because cap rates went down. So you need to do nothing. All you need to do is cap rates going down, so you make money, because you basically divide it by a smaller number, NOI divided by price. You didn't do anything magical to the NOI. As long as you take the same number, you divide it by a smaller number, guess what? You're getting more money for your property. The problem is that when that stops happening, okay, so cap rates do not go down, then in order to sell your property for more, you have to increase NOI. So that's a little more difficult than not increasing NOI. You have to increase NOI, because if not, you're not going to get an increase. Or even worse, if cap rates start going up, you have to increase NOI fast enough to compensate for that base wind, okay, that negative effect of now whatever NOI you have, you're going to divide it by a larger number. So you better increase your NOI really fast to get higher price. You usually cannot do that. Environment when interest rates going up, remember, even if your payments stay the same, the value of your property is going to go down. If you're thinking that you're going to sell it, for example, for a terminal cap rate of 9%, yes, you increase your NOI, but because the market changed, all of a sudden you're going to be selling it for less. And it didn't go from, 7 to 15. I went from 7 to 9, which, like that, can happen over a 7-year period or 8-year period. So that can happen. We'll talk about what are the determinants there. But I need to move with other things. So, okay. Unless you have any specific questions here.
No,
okay.
That's another question for another day.
Cash flows. Okay, so cash flow is basically summing this and that together. So in the first year, basically, or year 0, basically, we're paying 3.8. That is the minute that we sign, we buy the property. And after that, we're receiving those cash flows that are basically the NOIs, except for the year 8, where we receive both NOI and acquisition price, because we're getting rent through the year, and then we assume we sell it at the end of the year. And then after that, the property belongs to the next person. So we're receiving both. So that cash flow is $4.9 million. And then the last thing that we do, we create another column for the present value of those cash flows. Because remember, that's because we're getting $4.9 million in year 8, doesn't mean that those $4.9 million worth today, 4.9. And it's important how much they're worth today, because you buy the building today. Okay? So anything that you receive, you want to convert it to today's money to make sure that you're really comparing what I'm paying today and what is the value of what I'm receiving in today's money. So when you convert for time, so how far in the future you're going to get it, and you convert for risk, which is the required of return. So the first cash flow does not need to be converted because it happens today. So the value of 3.8 today is 3.8 today. Nothing special there. The value of 256 1 year from now, basically we're using the present value, future value formula. So we're taking that cash flow, divide by 1 plus R, which is 9%, to the power of 1, because we receive it 1 year from now. This is the present value equation. Okay? Same thing, if you take, for example, year 6, is that cash flow, divide by 1 plus R, again, the 9% we want, to the power of 6, because we're going to be receiving it 6 years from now. And same thing all the way until year 8. So basically, for example, this $306,000 that you're going to receive 7 years from now, really after you adjust it for time and the risk, are worth $167 today. And these $4.9 million that you're going to receive 8 years from now, in today's money, adjusting for time and risk, are worth $2.4 million. Okay? So let's calculate the value of the building. First of all, we can calculate the total present value. Equal sum. These are the values I'm going to receive in today's money from the building. Start whatever that is. We'll call it apartment building. The present value of the building is $3.874 million. So according to this, the building is worth a little bit more than what I'm expecting to pay for that. So if I'm expecting to pay 3.8 for something that is worth 3.9 almost, that is the relationship. Okay? The next one, we can calculate the NPV. And remember, the NPV is basically the present value of all future cash flows minus the initial investment. So really, this is the present value of all future cash flows, and minus the original investment will be minus 3.8, because that's what we invest originally, $74,000. And remember what these numbers means in a minute. And the last number we want to calculate here is the IRR, the internal rate of return. Okay, and do you already talk? I mean, I know I talked about it in the boot camp, but Dr. Lin is already talking about IRRs, or you're not there yet? Not there yet. Okay. IRRs. Okay, so the internal return, basically, what is the rate of return that you're going to receive in this investment, assuming that the cash flows are reinvested in this structure or in other investment has similar rate of return, and we use basically the IRR function. And remember, when we use the IRR function, we use it on the cash flows. We do not use it on the present values of the cash flows, because IRRs is basically discounting cash flows. So if you use it on discounted already, it's discounted and it's going to discount again. You don't want to double discount it. So you use it on the cash flows, not on the present value of cash flows. And what numbers do you think we're going to get here?
9%.
9.33%.
You know we're going to get. And why is that not surprising to you? Since you know it's 9.33. Is it surprising to you?
Huh?
Why is that reasonable? I know, but why is that reasonable? This is what you expected? If I tell you, hey, I pushed there and it's going to be 8.7%, would you believe me?
No,
Why not?
but you're expecting 9, plus you know there's 74,000 difference.
Extra.
Into a plus.
Okay? Basically, if you look at this number right here, this number, $74,000, is telling you that you're getting your required rate of return, which is 9, plus something. And that something is $74,000 in today's money. So whatever number it has to be here, it has to be higher than 9. Not because buildings have to return higher than 9, because according to this calculation, just seeing that this number is positive, and knowing that your required rate of return is 9%, so this number considered 9% plus something, this has to be higher than 9.33%.
Definition on the real.
Now, you can alter that. Of course, we're never going to forget the real estate agent that need to live too because they work hard. I simplified here, but yes, you can, in your project, you will consider commission. Okay? So basically, on this very simple example, you know that the investment value of the building is 3.874. The market value is 3.8, because if you think that you can buy it for 3.8, which means that they're willing to sell it to you for 3.8, it means that this is a fair market value. If not, they wouldn't be willing to sell it. If they think they can get a lot more somebody else, they say, forget about you, we'll wait for somebody else, pay 4.1. But if you can buy it for 3.8, it means this is the market value. Okay, that is what people in the market would pay. That's what they sell it for the price. But the investment value in this case is a little bit higher, which translates to a rate of return of 9.33%. Questions? So let's go to the next step. Because really, if you think about investors that invest in real estate, there are very few people. I know Miami is an anomaly and recently was an anomaly, but especially when we talk about real estate investments, so investment properties, there are very few people that buy those investments in cash. Even if they can buy in cash, they still in many cases choose to borrow some of the money. Okay? So what we want to do is take some of the effect of the same deal, but it's financed partially with your money and partially with somebody else's money, and see how it affects those returns. Okay, so basically what we call it is a leveraged or basically a leverage scenario or a leverage investment. And just to give you an idea of leverage. So I know people talk about leverage all the time. Think about that. Let's say that you have a certain skill, you're a lawyer, okay? And you charge $200 an hour. And once you get known, people pay you $200 an hour, and you kind of start building your clientele. You work 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 30, 40, 50 hours a week, 55, 60. At some point, it's like, okay, maybe I can increase I can't really work more than that, so I just increase my price. People still coming to you. You work 60 hours a week, making $350 an hour, let's say. Okay? Good for you. You want to make more money because that's human nature, right? So what are you going to do? What you're going to do is that you're going to hire somebody else, a young lawyer that doesn't have yet reputation, but a smart guy, girl that just finished law school, and you're going to pay them $150 an hour, and they're going to do some of your work, some of the busy work. So out of those 60 hours a week that you work, there's some work that they can do just fine. You don't need to do that. So they do the work for you, and you still charge your client $250 or whatever amount you say. Is it $350? Okay. You charge your client $350, and you pay the worker $150, and basically you're banking that difference. So every hour that your worker work, you're making $200. Now your worker is happy because they just started, just finished law school. They're making $150 an hour. That's good. You're happy because every hour they work, you make $200 off that, and then every hour you work, you make $350. Okay, so basically you can continue to work your 60 hours a week, and then have maybe your worker work another 60 hours a week, and you make money on them. And then you hire another person, and another person, another person, and basically every time that you hire a person, it's because you think that you can charge on their work more than what you pay them. That is why anybody that hire you, that's why they hire you. If somebody's hiring for a job and say, I'm going to pay you $80,000 a year, they're not going to pay you $80,000 a year because you're a nice guy. They're going to pay you $80,000 a year because they think that whatever you produce for them is worth 120. Okay, or some number higher than 80. If they think that what you're worth for the firm is 70, they would not give you 80, unless it's your dad that runs the firm. Okay, but we're talking about free market. So this is the idea of leverage. Basically, it works very well on the way up because you have all those workers. And you have basically unlimited, right? And you can hire as many lawyers as you want. Each one of them work a lot of hours, and you're making $200 of every hour out of those work. And basically, the more you have, the more money you make. That is how companies become large, because basically they hire a lot of people, they pay them fair salaries, but they charge their clients even more for what they produce, and that's how companies become viable. So it works very well on the way up. The problem is what happened on the way down. Because on the way down, if people all of a sudden stop using your services for whatever reason, so I know in the case of law, it's not like during a recession, there's still effect of that, but less than that. There's some cases where all of a sudden people would stop using your services or use your services less, and then you have, let's say in this simple case of you and your worker that each one work 60 hours a week, but now you don't have 60 hours for them to work. So you still need to pay them $150 an hour, but they only work 10 hours a week rather than 40 because the work is not there. So you pay them 10 times, sorry, you pay them for whatever hours, but basically you can't charge all those hours, and you start losing money on every hour they work because a lot of the hours they're in the job, they basically don't do anything, they don't produce anything. And if you have 10 of those that sit there, you basically have 10 people that get paid and don't produce what they should be producing. Okay, so think about those people, the person that you hired for $80,000 and supposed to produce 120, and they should, because in a good economy they can do all the work and they produce 120. But in a bad economy, they can try as hard as possible, but yeah, they just not work. So all of a sudden they produce 60, so you lose $20,000 on each one of them, and you have 20 of those. That's a problem. So the idea of this leverage, it's working both ways. It's working very well for you in the upswings, but it also works against you in a pretty painful way on the downswing. And you can say, you know what, you're just going to fire those people. That's fine, you can. But then when the economy is picking up again, they need to hire them again, and you need to fire them again, and it's very difficult, costly, just hiring, rehiring people all the time. It's a problem. And also depends what country you're in, and sometimes you can't just fire people, and sometimes you have to pay them compensation, etc. It's not a very smooth thing, and you also don't know exactly when you need to hire them and to fire them. So it can be painful all the way down. Especially when you're talking about money. Okay, so the idea with, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, but we're also at it in an at-will state.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. But even if you can fire them very quickly, it's still a painful proposition. Especially if you have, think about it, if you're a big company, all of a sudden, yes, I'm going to fire those 3,000 people, and then next year when the economy is going to go back, you think you can hire 3,000 quality people quickly? No, you can't. So you're going to have all this work that need to get done, but you can't do, so you lose again. So regardless, it's still painful.
That's
So,
in a real life situation, a real life scenario, to determine your required rate, would you use or find the risk of this project compared to the risk of another investment or an alternative investment?
yes. Okay. Now, talking about leverage, when we talk about financial leverage, it's the exact same concept. When you borrow money from the bank, you would never borrow at 4% if you think you're going to make 3. But you borrow at 4 because you think you're going to make 6. So you pay the bank 4, just like you pay your employer 80, but then you generate of them 6, just like you generate from your employee 120. Okay? So you pay something and you generate higher return. That is the idea. And the more you borrow, the more those extra 2% or 3% or whatever it is a spread you can make on more and more and more dollars that you borrow. So if I borrow a lot of money at 4%, invest them at 8%, I'm getting the difference on all those dollars. The problem, of course, is when I'm borrowed at 4 planning to make 8, but then, yes, I was planning to make 8, but things went down, and all of a sudden I'm making only 2. So yes, I'm still making money, but no, I'm not making money because I'm paying 4 for those 2 that I produced. So I'm losing 2 on every dollar that I borrowed, and if I borrow those dollars, I'm in trouble. And I'm also in trouble because I can't fire those dollars. Okay? Basically, the only way that I can fire those dollars is repay the loan, but that is the least likely time that you can repay the loan. That is the worst time for you to repay the loan because I don't have any money. The property is doing terrible. How can I pay this loan? You can't. Well, you can sell the property, but again, remember, if your property is doing very poorly, if you sell it, you're going to sell it for a very low price, so you lose. Okay? So in this example, you can't even fire your employee. So let's see what it looks like. This is your spreadsheet. Exact same thing as before. Those numbers are exactly the same. Remember 933, 74, whatever that is. All the numbers here are the same. Those numbers are this number is the same, 7 and 9.5. And then we have those new outputs, which we'll discuss in a minute. And we have, of course, all this area here. So let's see what it means. Let's make it as big as we can and still fit everything. All right, so the first thing that we have extra here is now we apply basically leverage. So the first thing that we do is that we consider the fact that we pay some down payment and the other part we are financing. So in this case, we are putting a down payment of $1.5 million, which means that we are borrowing 2.3. Pretty simple. Together, 3.8. Then we're going to pay whatever it is the mortgage rate in the market. So depends on the quality of this building and the interest rates in the market. Let's say that the rate is 6%. Okay, they can probably borrow for cheaper, but let's say 6%. That is what the bank is charging you, and we assume that it's a 20-year mortgage. Bless you. Okay. Now you also want to receive higher rate of return on your investment because remember this investment now have higher risk. Remember, when you increase the leverage, you basically increase the probability that now if your investment is not doing well, because think about the scenario that I just described before. If this investment is making 2%, okay, not ideal, not your dream investment, but okay, so it's making 2%. You can do better. You'll do better some other times, but you're not going to lose this property. You're just going to make you low rate of return. But if this investment made 2% and you borrowed at 6%, that is a problem. Okay, so basically in that scenario, even if you make low rate of return but the property is yours, it's fine. If you make low rate of return, and the property is not yours, it's partially owned by the bank, you're basically losing a lot of money on the money that you borrow, and then of the investment becoming a losing proposition. So this is a riskier scenario, and therefore you want to have a higher level required of return. So on that curve that we just draw, you basically again sliding up. How much you slide up depends on how much leverage you take. Okay, the more leverage you take, the more you slide up. So in this case, you want to get at least 11%. If not, you should not be investing in this property. The minimum DCR. DCR stands for debt coverage ratio. Debt coverage ratio. And debt coverage ratio is a particular ratio that the bank would require from you to have when they give you a loan. So in this case, it's 125, and the way this ratio is being calculated, debt coverage ratio is the ratio between what you or the bank has to agree with you. If not, it doesn't really matter that what you think, because they're the one giving the loan. The bank has to agree with you, or at least be somewhere ballpark with you, that you're going to make 256 next year after all expenses, and they want whatever you make to be at least 25% more than the payment you need to make for them. Okay, that's what 125 means. So when you take that NOI right here, and if you divide it by the payment that you need to pay the bank, that they're going to calculate based on how much they lend you, so you take this NOI divided by the payment that you make, the ratio has to be higher than 125. That is the criteria they give you. And the reason that they pick, for example, 125, it's because they want to make sure that, well, we want to have at least enough, and then 25% more as a cushion. And this cushion is that, yeah, we think you're going to make 256, but what happens if some big event or something, all of a sudden you couldn't rent your properties for what you thought. All of a sudden you have this big expense or something unexpected cause your NOI to be lower. We want you to still be able to pay back the loan. Remember, the bank is not in the business of taking properties from us. The bank is in the business of giving us the loan and getting the money back. It's true they're going to take your property from you, that's the last resort, but that is not their intent. Okay, so they want to have at least 125. Now, if it's a very high quality business, very high quality building, with very high quality tenant, with long leases, they maybe want only 115 because there's very little to go wrong. So for example, if you're renting your building to Walgreens for 30 years and the lease just started, and they say, okay, and it's a triple net, okay, so basically you have no surprise in terms of expenses because all expenses go on the tenant. You have no surprises in terms of income coming because we know Walgreens is going to pay you because it's rated, I don't know, A or A plus rating. So there's no surprise there, but still we know that even if there's no surprise, there's still something can happen. So we still want a small cushion, but we want 115. But if you have a building that has a lot more risk, so if you rent to low-income people or startup companies, or the location is not very desirable, basically a lot of things, or leases expire very soon, and you don't know if you can renew them or not, and maybe the building is going to stay vacant for a while, they would want this DCR to be much higher, 135, 150, 160, okay? And also depends on the relationship between you and the bank. If you show that you did it 10 times before, you have experience, you borrow money before, everything went as planned and all that, they kind of trust you, your judgment, they know that you know what you're doing, they would require a lower DCR. If it's the first time they see you doing that, no matter how smart you are, whatever the occasion is, they're always going to take a little bit more caution and require a slightly higher DCR. In this case, 125, it's probably what appropriate in the market for an average quality property or average plus quality property. Okay, so what we have here, we calculate this 2.3. We can calculate the payment. So the payment is basically using the payment function with 6%, with 20 years, and with that amount. And we do it on a yearly basis because each row here is a year, not a month. So basically your annual payment, even though you make them every month, but together all the payments you make over a year are $200,000, $524. That is your annual payment. Okay? Now when you're comparing this number, okay, comparing this number to what you're actually making, so you're taking this NOI and divide by the mortgage payment. So to calculate your debt coverage ratio, you're going to get 128. So basically, this number is 28% higher than that number. That means that even if this number falls, it has enough to fall until you can't make a payment. That's what the bank wants. So if you have 128 and the bank wants at least 125, you basically satisfied their condition. They would give you the loan. Okay? And this is basically an if function, and all I do here is say if this number is bigger than that number, then put yes. If not, put no. So for example, if I try to put a smaller down payment, like $1 million, and that means that I borrow 2.8, that means my payment is 244. I'm still making the same amount of money. So now the ratio between this number and that number is not that high anymore. It's only 5% higher. Okay, the amount I'm expecting to make relative to the new payment is only 5% higher. So the bank would say, no, that's not good enough. We cannot lend you $2.8 million. It's too risky. Okay, so we can go back. All right, and the last thing that we consider here is the mortgage bonds at sale. So remember, this is a 20-year mortgage, and after 8 years, we sell the building. So we're not going to be paying off the whole mortgage, right? Because it started $2.3 million. It's going to go to zero eventually, but we said after 8 years. Well, I created here a 20-year amortization table, all the way from 2.3 million, zero. We did it before, except before we did it month by month. Here I'm doing it year by year because that's all we need. And after 8 years, which is right here, this number, I'm left with $1.681 million. That is my mortgage bonds at sale. Questions? 3 minutes break. Please, everybody get up, wake up, go to the restroom, come back in 3 minutes. But twice. Any jumpers? How many group? Three. You have 3, so now you're gonna have 5. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Very good.
You have 4.
Be ready for the
I have 6.
90%.
Any other things before we start? You were supposed to remind me, but you didn't. Okay, I still remember. All right, so let's go forward. So we talked about all this inputs and outputs. Talk about inputs and outputs. Let's see how it translates into the spreadsheet, the rest of the spreadsheet. Guys, I know it's 9 o'clock, that's why I give you a break. So everybody's a little bit more awake. Let's go forward. Column G. Column G has DS. DS stands for debt service. It's basically what you have to pay the bank every year. Okay? In year 1, you have to pay them $200,524. That is how you calculate, that is the payment. The same thing you have to pay them in year 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, all the way, basically for the first 7 years. That is your monthly payment times 12. Okay, and because we assume here a conventional, not necessarily a conventional loan, but a standard constant payment mortgage, the payment is going to be always the same because it's a fixed rate mortgage. Okay? Then in the last year, you have to pay 2 things. When you sell the property, you have to pay the regular payments through the year, okay, in year 8, and when you sell the property, you have to pay whatever left. So this number plus that number come together to 1.8 million. So every year you pay 200,000, and then in the last year you pay 1.8 or almost 1.9 million dollars. Okay, so those are the payments what come out of your checking account every year. Now your investments. So rather than your cash flows, now you're talking about levered cash flows. You initially do not invest 3.8 million, you only invest 1.5 million. Remember, the rest of the money comes from somebody else, wherever it is the lender. So your investment is only 1.5 million. And then you have cash flows that come to you. And the cash flows come to you. It's the regular cash flows, this 256, which is revenue minus expenses. That's your NOI, 56. But then you have to pay the bank 200. So really whatever left to you is $55,000. And then in year 2, you expect to make 264. You pay the bank 200, so you're left with 63. And so on and so forth until the end. Till the end, the very last year, yes, you have this number, which is basically what you receive in rent, plus what you expect to sell the building, that's $4.9 million. And you have this payment of 1.8, so whatever left to you is $3 million. By the way, when people do those projects, I always get at least one group that forget to pay the loan back. Guys, in real life, you will never forget to pay the loan back. They get those, oh my God, you get those really nice returns. Well, yes, if you don't pay the money back, you're going to have very high returns. But in real life, the way it works is that first of all, the bank take all the money. Basically, they have the lien on the project. They take all your money, they pay themselves, and whatever left they give to you. They maybe forget to give it to you, but you're never going to forget to give it to them. That's not the way it's going to work. So make sure you're remembering to pay the money back, because if not, you're going to have those very attractive deals that are really not very attractive. So this is the level cash flows. We also want to take the present value of those cash flows, just for the same reason we took the present value of the regular cash flows. So now this is our scenario. How much is $55,000 next year worth? Well, you discount it 1 year at what rate of return?
9%.
No, the
11%.
11.
Okay? So, again, this is our 55 divided by 1 plus R, but now our R is 11% because we are investing in something that is risky. It's the same building, the same risk of building, but now we add financial risk, financial leverage. And we discount it 1 time because we receive it 1 year from now. Same thing about this one, for example. This one, for example, it's this $105,000 that you receive in 7 years, discount it by 1 plus 11, right here, and then to the power of 7, because you receive it in 7 years. Okay, so this is basically the discounted levered cash flows. And now we can calculate all the values again. So we want to know the present value of this deal, summing all those present value of future cash flows. The value of this investment is $1.685 million, where you only invested $1.5 million. That means that the NPV is this amount plus, minus your investment, or plus the negative number, depends on which number you point to. So your NPV here is 185, which means you're going to get your 11% plus $185,000 in today's money. So when I'm calculating this IRR, and remember I'm calculating it not on the levered, not on the discounted, on the undiscounted. So those values right here. The rate of return is 1284. So the same building, the same expectations exactly. I didn't assume, I'm going to get more rent, or I'm going to have lower vacancy, or I'm going to have less. Exact same building. People in the building don't even know whether you take a loan or not. They don't care. But you as an investor do care, because this investment is different than that one. This is, let's say, average building with no added risk. This is average building with added risk, basically added financial risk. Okay? Because it have added risk, financial risk, you should be expecting to receive higher rate of return. In this case, the difference is about 3.5% higher. Because on your money, which is the 1.5 million, you did earn your 9.3%. That is your money. And then on the money that you borrowed, which is 2.3 million, on that money, you earn the difference between this number, 9.3, and what you borrowed, which is 6. So on every dollar you borrowed, you made 3.3%. Comes in the calculation, basically come to overall an extra 3.5% on average.
In this course, you're going to get into an owner-occupied scenario too, or?
No, because an owner-occupied, you should not be calculating your IRR, because your return is not, you don't have to bring an NOI. You have basically the enjoyment of living in your own house.
Just the financing aspect. I think that's the other class.
Here we're talking about, we separate them. So for the owner-occupied, we do a buy versus rent. Everybody needs a place to live.
What
The
it
questions are-
means for the business,
Like
right?
a commercial property.
Or if looking from the other side,
Yes.
yes, so basically from the business point of view, whether they should buy or rent, yes, we'll do that. I'm confused, I'm sorry.
You're good. No, it's just, you were talking about the financing and the service coverage ratio, what have you, for income producing.
Oh, no, yes,
Talking about-
I didn't talk about this.
Okay.
I think you were talking about your real estate finance.
That's
There's
right,
yes, other rules, but it's the same idea. Questions on that number? Question on any of this analysis?
Yeah, one question. When you're, let's say, like developing something and you want to pay off your loan,
Huh?
right?
You guys, I'm smiling because you guys have awesome questions, but guess what? We'll talk about development. You just later.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, in order to pay off your loan, can you defer payments on your loan until you
Yes.
actually have an income
Yes,
producing
you
property?
get whatever they call a construction loan,
Yeah.
which maybe means that you don't have to make any payments whatsoever, basically the line of credit. You first use your own money, and you have to prove that you use your own money for a while, so you have some big skin in the game, and then you can use their money, and for a while you would not even have to make any payments. You basically would just accrue your interest on top, and then you start making the payments when you start either leasing or selling the units.
Sorry, okay.
Okay? Later on. Any other questions? Let's try to look at the sensitivity of these numbers. So again, like I said before, when things are going well, the leverage is really going to work to your benefit. So for example, if I all of a sudden, instead of 256, right here, instead of 256, all of a sudden had a really good year because the building next door, something happened there, it got caught on fire, and nobody got injured, but they don't have a place to live. So now it pushed basically rent prices in my building higher, and now I can get an AOI of 300,000, and every year after that higher. All of a sudden, yes, my IRR went up by extra 3%, but my levered IRR went up by an extra 5 or 6%. Okay, so everything that happened good here would happen really good here. On the other hand, if you had some other scenario of all of a sudden there's a damage in part of your building, it got flooded for whatever reason, so a portion of your building basically have to evacuate the people, and they can't get in for a while. And then even when you think they can get in, then you find out that from the flood you have some mold, and it's going to take forever to fix it and all. So you basically stuck here with, let's go to the extreme, 150. Now in the case of 150, if it was your building, you would still make a very small rate of return. You would make about 1% of return. It's not what you dream of, it's not how you're going to get rich, but basically what's going to happen is that you're going to make this low rate of return, and then you're going to fix this flood, mold, whatever issue, you're going to bring it back to wherever it should be, and you're going to be getting decent rate of return after that. Okay? However, if you leverage that investment, you're done. Because you're generating here 150,000, you need to pay the bank 200,000. How are you going to do that? Well, maybe you have $50,000 stashed somewhere, so you do it for a year, and then the next year come around, and you need to find another 50,000, and how are you going to do that? Maybe you have another 50,000. Eventually, at some point here, you have to tell the bank, I'm sorry, payment's at 200,000, and I just can't pay you. And the bank will say, we're sorry too. We have to take the building from you. And when they take the building from you, what do you think they're going to do? Remember? You can't forget to pay them. First of all, they sell the building, they pay themselves, and if there's something else, you're going to get it. Let's see what you're going to get. If you're selling, for example, your building here after year 4, for example, because for a while you kind of scramble money from other places, you made the payments for a while, but after a few years, I just can't do it because I ran out of money, so I can't do it, so I have to basically foreclose on the building. You have a building here that is generating $163,000. It has problems because everybody around know that, oh, this is what happened, and it's not that, you have some problem, physical problems, you have mold, you have fault, whatever it is. And if somebody reasonably want to buy this building from the bank, they can take this 163, and let's say that they can increase it by 1 plus, let's say 2.5%, so they will get a little bit more. And then they need to divide it by appropriate cap rate. Now, if an appropriate cap rate usually would be, like we said, 7%, but now your building has a lot of trouble, and it's risky, and it's foreclosure, and has to sell fast, people maybe would pay for that 8.5 cap rate. So if you divide it by 0.085, for example, you basically are with $1.97 million. Now take this amount, pay commissions to the seller and all that. Let's say you left with 1.9 million, less, but let's say 1.9. That is after 4 years. If you look at your bonds after 4 years, it's $2 million. If the bank is getting 1.9 from your property and you owe them 2 million, in the worst case scenario, they call it even. Sorry, in the best case scenario, they call it even. They basically say, okay, we took your property, we pay whatever it is, and you have nothing. You lost so don't look at this number. This number is meaningless. You lost 100% of your money. Not 7% a year or 6%, so it's kind of hurt, but we're going to make it back later. You lost everything. And guess what? People that use leverage in a quantity of 50, 60%, 70%, the numbers are that. If people use leverage about 60 to 70% of the value of the building, in the last 40 years, they went bankrupt at least 3 times. In the last 40 years, there was at least 3 times that they went bankrupt, meaning they lost everything. The last time, of course, that was an easy one. That's they went bankrupt even if they borrowed a lot less than 70%. But the last one, basically, if you borrowed 40% levered and lost some of your tenants, and you have debt to pay, and you have to sell your property at fire sale, even if you borrow only 40%, you're done, 100%. So it doesn't matter if you were worth, before the boom, if your family was worth $50 million, you're worth 0. And it doesn't matter if the market recover after that, because it can recover as much as it wants, except you have no skin in the game anymore because you're already out. Game is over. So people always take, not always, but a lot of people take leverage very lightly because it works very well on the upside. Oh, 9% looks good, but 12.84 looks better, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that there is no space for leverage. Leverage obviously is something that exists for a reason. People use it for a reason. But if you look at some of the evidence, people that lever too much are simply out of the game at the worst time possible. If you look at some of the top investors out there, number 1, Warren Buffett, 0 leverage, always, never borrowed a penny. He's actually the guy that's waiting with a pile of cash, waiting for all these other guys to go bankrupt and buy them in 2009 at ridiculously low prices. If you think of companies like Microsoft, Apple, and many of their peers, they have no leverage whatsoever. That gives them a lot of other kind of leverage to basically take advantage of the other players when they're weak and they're bleeding, and take advantage of them buying them for fire sales, or basically to able to buy whatever they want at price that makes sense for them whenever they want. So leverage is great. It works well when things go up, but it's extremely, extremely painful on the way down. And this way down, it's not like, oh, it just happened this last time, but don't worry about it, it never happened before. 3 times in the last 40 years, you would go bankrupt. And you don't need to go 3 times, you need to go 1 time bankrupt. Because even in the last 40 years, about every decade and a half, you went bankrupt if you had leverage of about 60 to 70% on an average place in the United States, which means that you will never recover after that. Okay, so think about it. If you, for example, I think we talked about it a little bit. When you invest, for example, for retirement, And remember we talked about the very first lecture, take risk, start investing today, take risk, don't take too much risk. Think about the scenario of taking too much risk. Okay, basically, okay, how can you take too much risk? You're basically adding too much leverage. That means that at some point in your life, it's only a matter of time, you would lose everything. It's not that you lose some of it, you're going to lose everything. And if you were very successful, and that's the problem, if you started at age 30, and you start learning about investments, now it goes well, and you have some experience and all that, and then you add some more leverage because you learn about how you can get higher return, and then you 40, 45, you have these 15 or 20 years of experience that you make those very high returns. Are you going to stop? Most people don't, because they did very well. I know what I'm doing. Believe me, I've done it for 20 years. Except that they don't really, because again, a lot of people know what happens, they don't know why things happen. So all of a sudden a recession hit, and they lever to their eyeballs with 70% or 80% LTV, that's not unusual. I'm not talking 100% like during the bubble. I'm talking about 70, 80%. And a small hiccup, all of a sudden take them 100% down. So at age 50 or 55, they all of a sudden realize that, yes, we're worth $25 million, and now worth zero. And we're also 55 years old, so we really do not have a chance to make it up, so we're done. You said that, I didn't. I said that.
So what do you think is like an average of a safe amount to borrow?
It is very much, we'll talk about that too, but it really depends on the type of tenant and the type of building that you have. So yes, if you have a very high quality tenant with a very long lease, it is okay to leverage a little bit more. But if you have a risky building, if you look at real estate investment trust, which is the next topic for next time, look at real estate investment trust, they levered about 40%. So they own
60.
equity 60 and levered about 40, and even that a little bit aggressive. But think about it, they also have advantages that you don't have as a single investor. If they're in really trouble, they can still go to the market and sell equity and kind of survive longer than you can, because you can go to your mom, dad, friend. After that, it's like, bank is not going to talk to you anymore. Like, where are you going to go? They can go to the market and they can kind of get out of it better than you can, and they still only levered about 40%. But if you look at the evidence of companies in general, not just real estate, companies in general, companies that have more predictable cash flows, for example, utilities, companies that sell water and electricity and things like that, or medicine, that sell pills that have patents for the next 15 years and have very predictable cash flows, things that people buy regardless of whether the economy is good or bad, they're going to take their pill. Those companies, right? Those companies have very predictable cash flows. They usually have high leverage or relatively high leverage. The companies that have less predictable cash flows, so those startups or companies in industries that have a lot of fluctuations, they would have very low leverage. For the exact same reason that we just talked about.
How can you optimize the spreadsheet so that it can maximize IRR based on the amount of leverage that how that is realistic?
Well, there's no way to optimize it, because in the scenario that we just described, if those are your assumptions, the higher the loan, the higher the return. Okay, so there is no way to optimize. Basically, if I'm going to borrow all the amount, so if I'm going to put a down payment that is very low, I'm going to get a very high return. Now, the bank is not going to approve me, but assuming that they are, because I make them believe that they're really going to make a lot more money, or they're in a time that they approve everybody, yeah, you can. So basically, the more you borrow, the more money you make, but also that means that it's the other side. So I think that what he's saying is how do you optimize between how much I'm going to make versus how much I'm going to lose when things go down. That is where you need to have a dynamic spreadsheet, where instead of putting one value for each cell, you want to put all the different possibilities. And we'll use a different software for that next semester. So, not yet. But we'll get to that. Because because you all realize this is very simplistic, right? I know if it's the first time you see that, it's like, what? How do you do that? Yeah, there's some numbers that make sense, but this is really simplistic. I mean, all we do here is divide, multiply. Yes, you need to know the terminology, but there's really nothing fancy here. But because it's so simplistic, there's also a lot of holes into that. And the biggest hole here is the fact that, no, I'm not going to make 256, 415 next year. It's going to be a different number. Slightly higher, a lot higher, slightly lower, a lot lower, it's going to be different. No, I'm not going to sell the building for exactly 7.00 cap rate. It's going to be lower, a lot lower, higher, a lot higher. If I don't have, and the same for all those other variables. If I don't have a way to control for all those effects, and then see what is the probability I'm going to make a certain rate of return, what is the probability I'm going to go bust, I didn't do a complete job. So most people in the industry, they don't even use, well, the less sophisticated investors, they don't even use that. The slightly more sophisticated, they use this and they do 2 or 3 scenarios like you do in your project too. And then if people are really getting more sophisticated and they work for firms that invest a lot of money, they go to the next level, which is basically putting different values into each cell and intermingle them together, correlate them together, and that is for next course. But one step at a time. We didn't talk about project 2, but go ahead.
Sorry, well, let's be, so if you were to buy, going back to the trailer park scenario, if you were to buy the trailer park,
You're not these trailer parks.
I think it's a great, if you don't lever yourself too much, and you buy the trailer park, let's say you have a lot of cash, you buy several trailer parks, you can make a ton of money.
Sure.
Like more money than buying these
Yes,
units.
but it's a challenge to manage a trailer park.
Yeah,
It's a challenge to manage a trailer park.
yeah, but also maintenance is cheaper, right?
I'm not arguing. I actually told you that the value propositions, those high cap rates, historically make more return. In this case, it's all require a lot more work, but yes, you're going to make more returns investing in a trailer park on average. If that is your strategy, and say, look, we are, and there are companies that's what they do, right? I mean, they buy very low income properties, so they buy at the very high cap rates, and they make a lot more money than somebody who buy trophy properties, like the Empire State Building, and the Hancock Building, and whatever it is, they're going to buy them at cap rate of 3%, but they have different objectives.
Yeah.
Different investors attract different things. There's some people that want capital preservation, and some other people that want capital growth, and some people want more. If you're an insurance company, you not allowed to invest in certain real estate below a certain grade. Just not allowed because of regulation. So you have to buy those high quality property. So it depends on who you are.
Real quick, and I hate to always circle back to owner occupied, it's just the world that I operate in. That level of default you're talking about for investment properties, if they're overly levered, over 60 or 70%, you find that same level of default rate for an operating entity that occupies that space that's relatively similarly levered.
It should be different.
It's typically,
The owner occupied is a lot less. The default rate is a lot
default
lower.
rate, if there's still that,
A lot
even
less,
up to
yeah.
80% level.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the default rate, guys, there's a difference. There's a very big difference, and Ross is making a good point here. There's a very big difference in default rate when it's owner occupied versus investment property. If it's owner occupied, meaning you live in your own property, you're going to do anything in your power to keep the property yours. Okay, because if it's you and your spouse and your 2 kids live there, you're going to make sure that you're not on the street and you can do whatever it is. You're going to give up everything else
Business
for that.
occupies it.
Or in business. But if it's an investment property, that you have your other things and you also have this investment, yes, it's sad to lose it, but it's not going to be any reward for you. And basically also you have less things that you can do because it's the extra that you have. It is all your extra. You don't have this extra to take care of that extra. So when things go bad, you default. So for your property, at least you can use 100% of your income and go work second job, whatever it is, to make sure you keep your house, and that's what some people do. All right, guys, I want to talk about project 2 because I want you to leave the class today knowing what we need to do. So, but we still need to talk about cap rates more next time because we just scratched the surface, but I want to talk about it more. Meeting, Blackboard. under projects, under project 2. Okay, so basically this particular project is, unlike the first one that was for income producing property, a place where you basically consume, where you live yourself. Either you buy the place and consume it that way, or you rent the place and you consume it on a monthly basis. Here we're talking about investment. Somebody who buy a property not to live there, but to make money of it. And same rules as before. Basically, I don't know if you realize, but the assignment is due only before October 4th, which is, your syllabus says October 2nd. So you have 2 extra days, and the reason is because we haven't started it today, so I want to make sure that you have today's lecture, which now you can start working on the project, and you have basically 2 weeks after that, even though the project been there for a while. So you have almost 2 weeks from today to work on the project, but the project been up for a while. Same rules in terms of being late and all that. Need to be professionally done. Introduction, like the first one, tell the reader what they're going to read. Property description. Pick a property, income producing property, any property. And I don't care where it is, you can choose wherever you want. You need to put some down payment. I said here anywhere between 1 and 5 million. To be honest, I don't care. You can pick any number. Put some down payment. Assume money is not an issue. And really, if you think about it, if it's a good investment, money is not an issue. If it's not your money, somebody else is going to come up with money. So you can find a $1 million property and you decide I'm going to put a $200,000 down payment or $300,000 or $400,000 down payment. Or you can find a $20 million property and you decide that you're going to put a $5 million down payment. I don't care. What I do care about is that the property has to be part equity and part debt. You cannot buy a property for $5 million and just say, I'm putting $5 million down. Okay? It has to be part of that's going to be debt, part of it's going to be equity. You decide how much is each. Okay? So basically you have money. So maybe I didn't write it very well. I said here 1 to 5, but you have money on me. Assumptions. Remember, this is the important one. All the assumptions that you make need to be justified. There's some things here that I tell you that are basically made. For example, selling expenses, which you need to add to the spreadsheet, are 4%. DCR, I'm telling you it's not going to be less than 1.3. This is, let's say it's a given. And I'm telling you that you're also financing with a 10-year interest only. I didn't tell you what the rate is. You figure out what it is. But the 10-year interest only, that is that loan. So any assumption that you put in the report, basically every number that you put into that spreadsheet, okay, because you're basically going to use this spreadsheet. Okay, you're going to alter a few things here as needed, but basically every number you put here in the inputs, and you tell me why you put this number, just like you did with the first report. Okay? You can tell me what is the before tax expected return. We haven't considered taxes. So basically, that number right here is your, whatever would come here, is your before tax rate of return. Before tax levered rate of return. Right? Now, on top of that, and we'll talk about next time, you also need to pay taxes to the government. Here, the only tax to consider is property tax. That is operating expense. Okay? But in addition to property tax, we have actually income tax and capital gain taxes. So when we sell the property, or when we make money every year, we need to pay taxes too. That's not for this project. We'll discuss it next time. But for this one, before tax, this is your rate of return. And you tell me what it is. You need to tell me what is the maximum price that you'd pay for the property. So for example, if this property, you find a property that the asking price is $4 million, and according to your calculation, you're going to get only 8.5% where you really want 9. That means that you cannot pay $4 million for that, or you will not pay $4 million for that. You need to find using GOLSIC, and I'm not going to feed you like I did for the first time because now you already know how to do that. You need to find what is the price associated with just the right rate of return that will be good for you. And you say, oh, you know, I'm not going to pay 4, but if you give it to me for 3.75, that's a deal. Okay? Because there's always a price that will make sense for you. You need to find what it is. Sometimes it will be lower than what they want, so they want 4, and the max you will pay is 375, and that's it. And sometimes they want 4, and you're willing to pay all the way to 4.5. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to say, hey, you want 4? How about I'll give you 4.5? That's not how it's going to go, but it's still good to be come to negotiation and say, he wants 4. I'm actually willing to pay 4.5. I'm still going to try to get them to 3.8, because why not? But it's still good to know that, hey, I'm getting something that to me is worth 4.5, so even if I can't get them down a dime, I'm still getting a good deal for myself. So this max price can be either lower or higher than what they want. You need to determine what it is. Then you need to do a sensitivity analysis. You're basically going to pick up, you're going to have your average scenario, which is what you expect, and then you're going to have a positive scenario and a negative scenario. In positive scenario, you're going to change 1 or 2 or 3 things that can happen if things go better. So for example, there's some reason that maybe your NOI is going to go up. There's some reason maybe your cap rate is going to go down. There's some reason maybe your NOI growth is going to go higher. 1, 2, or 3 of those factors can make results higher. And you also need to tell me what is it in the market that can make it do that. The same thing on the way down. Okay, so the opposite of what I just said. So you have your regular scenario, optimistic, pessimistic, give me the rates from that, and then you conclude. And basically at the end, you're going to tell me whether you think it's a good or a bad investment. Now remember, you're not selling me a property here, and you're not being graded or whether you picked a good or a bad property. You can pick a property that at the end tell me this is a terrible investment, and you can still get 100% on the project, okay? Whether it's a terrible investment doesn't mean you're going to get a terrible grade. So don't spin your wheels forever to find a good property. That's not the point. Just pick a property and go with it, okay? 1 second. So basically, whether it's a good investment or a bad investment, you can still get a very high grade. Actually, you will get a bad grade if you take a bad investment, all of a sudden try to upsell in a way that doesn't make any sense. All of a sudden you come on something that is great, it's like, no, this is not how it works. Okay, so keep it as real as possible, and you basically here being judged on your analysis, not on whether you found something that is good. Another thing, before I forget, another thing is that we do not do due diligence here. We do not do due diligence. What I mean by that is that if the seller tell you that the cap rate here is 7%, that is the cap rate. Even though we know it's not the cap rate, but I don't need you to go talk on the phone, look at the financials, getting there, asking for the tax returns, because that is not the point of that. We're assuming that they're telling the truth, even though we know that they don't. For exercise purposes, that's really all we need. So either if they tell you what is the cap rate, take this given, believe it, for the purpose of the project, or if they don't give you the cap rate, they tell you what is the NOI, you can find the cap rate. You have NOI, you know what they want, divide by 1 by the other, you got the cap rate, assuming that the NOI is the true one, even though I know, and we all know that they're probably exaggerating somewhat.
Do we have to prepare a pro forma?
No. No, you're taking their NOIs given. Because pro forma require you to make assumption about expenses, and I mean, there's so many operating expenses that just take a lot of effort to, it's not the purpose of that. The purpose of that is you understand the dynamic behind this decent cash flow. Those assumptions, a lot of what we talk about is what you did already for buy versus rent.
Okay.
Talk about some of the expenses that are going along.
Yes.
It's not so much of a real estate part. Talking about, how much it will cost you to pay property tax, etc. First of all, we'll do that, but beside that, it's part of what you do when you actually buy the property.
Okay.
The focus here should be on DCF. Again, since we only have 2 weeks, I can't ask you to do everything. I want to focus on something that's important. What else? Any other questions? I know you guys are eager to go, but I want to make sure that you guys are ready to go with this project. Snapshots? So yeah, a picture of the property. Snapshots, when you calculate things, I want to see the Excel spreadsheet of what you calculated. Page limit. Page limit. Page limit is 10 pages. And That's it. Alright guys, thank you for listening, I'll see you guys next Wednesday, have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.